This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/get started. That's GREENLIGHT.com/get started.
So he doesn't say it's Morbin time even one time, not once?
No, not in the whole movie.
Did you ask for your money back?
Oh, I didn't actually go see it. Why would I go see it?
And for this service, you shall henceforth be known as Sir Tom of the House of
Hey,
Bad
guys.
Bad.
What are you doing? What's going on?
Wow.
Oh, seriously? Cecil, dude, you're interrupting my knighting. You can sit. He's got the sword.
Tom, why are you being knighted?
Okay, if you must know, it's for this week's episode, obviously.
That's right. Tom's talking about King Charles, and we thought, what better way to get us in the mood than a taste of the crown?
Right, but kings don't just randomly knight people. You have to do something, special for the crown in order for that to happen?
Oh, he did.
Oh, really? What's that?
Cut the brakes on Meghan Markle's car.
That'll do it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I did.
Hello and welcome to Citation Needed, the podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it on Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts, because this is the internet, and that's how it works now. I'm Eli Bosnick, and I'll be leading you through the Hall of Portraits this evening, but I'll need my retinue. First up, two men officially out of the Citation Needed COVID tontine, Noah and Cecil.
Okay, well, but given all the consecutive baby colds you've had, I feel like COVID gave up on you when it heard the wait time.
And now that I've lost all sense of taste, I'm thinking of moving to maybe New Jersey. I think New Jersey's where I should be.
Pasta on top of the pizza, Cecil.
No.
Huh? And also joining us tonight, a man who, based on his vaccine card, could officially be considered doping for said tontine, Tom.
Okay, it is not so much a card at this point as it is a scroll, Eli. We need some real estate on that thing.
Yeah. Now, before we begin tonight, I'd like to take a second to thank our patrons. Patrons, without you, I'd kill myself so my family
Jesus
could have my
Christ.
insurance money.
Lord, that's a lot of
I'm just
pressure.
saying, keep it in mind next time you have to tighten the belt or cut your budget.
Jesus Christ, dude.
Speaking of belts, our patrons are currently enjoying our special patron-only bonus episode in which we break down the original Frank Dew article from Black Belt Magazine. So if you'd like to learn how to join their ranks, be sure to stick around till the end of the show. And with that out of the way, tell us, Cecil, what person, place, thing, concept, phenomenon, or event will we be talking about today?
Today we're going to be talking about late Queen Elizabeth's son-nephew, King Charles.
And Tom, you thought to yourself, you know what no one's talking about right now? The royal family. Are you ready to trend?
Okay. All right. I am ready, or I am not the cornballer of West Sussex.
Yeah, I'm not a pedophile either, Tom. Let's have the essay.
All right. We just have to say it sometimes so people know. All right, as I'm sure you are all aware, even if you don't want to be, the Queen of England died just the other day at the tender age of 96.
What?
It's true. Now, because the passing of royal power takes place by decree literally instantaneously, the very moment that the Queen's heart beat its last, with not even 1 nanosecond of delay, faster even than light itself can travel, Charles, formerly the Prince of Wales, and after waiting longer than any other successor to the throne in history, immediately became the King of England, having finally procured his first promotion in his entire adult life at the age of 73. I would make fun here, but then I remembered that America has its own obsession with septuagenarian male leaders. so I quietly set down my throwing stones.
I still think it's weird you had your throwing stones monogram, Tom. I feel like it defeats the purpose.
I don't want them to know. It does not defeat the purpose. It is the purpose. King Charles, whether or not the royal family interests you, and even if you think the whole idea of a king to be laughably anachronistic, if not outright absurd, is nonetheless a remarkably interesting man. His story is just absolutely defined by its contradictions. He's lived a life of luxury and horror, has said and done some truly awful shit, and yet he still cuts a figure so tragic it would be hard not to feel at least a little sympathy for the man.
I feel like I'm up to the challenge.
Hear, hear, Noah. Hear, hear.
Now, we'll begin with his story in roughly chronological order in a moment, but I do also feel compelled to point out a couple of things that don't have a place in the chronology per se, but are nonetheless interesting.
I mean, all things have a place in the chronology. That's how time works, Tom.
Okay, yeah, I knew I could count on you to purposely misunderstand that point, Eli.
That's what I'm here for.
That's well done. Well done. First, consider that if you're Charles, your whole life was designed so that you always had to think about the death of your own mother, not just as a personal loss, but also as a political, professional, and indeed historic event. From boyhood, the very fact of who he was and how he was raised, and indeed his very utility in the world, existed only in the long shadow of death, simultaneously looming over his own mother and then literally defining who he was to the world, a fact which he found to be, quote, ghastly and inexorable, end quote.
Oh, so like if your mom was a Lee Bennett Hopkins award-winning literal genius and you made fun of Kevin Sorbo's movies for a living, would it be like that, Tom? Is that what it would be like?
I don't know if this helps, Eli, but I'm pretty sure your mom, you, and Lee Bennett Hopkins are the only people who have ever heard of that award. So I think you're
Jesus
good.
Christ.
Sorry, Liz. I know you listen to these. I
had to Google who it was anyway.
Literally nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Yikes.
Anyway, I want to take a moment to note the rather sizable shift in business card that the ascension to the throne entailed for Charles. Until the other night, when his mom died, Charles's title was, quote, His Royal Highness, Prince Charles, Philip, Arthur, George, Prince of Wales, Earl of Chester, Duke of Cornwall, Duke of Rothesay, Earl of Carrick, Baron of Renfrew, Lord of the Isles, and Prince and Great Steward of Scotland. End quote. His new title is rather significantly shorter and punchier with King Charles.
Now I see why the artist formerly known as Prince just went with that one weird symbol.
Yeah.
Now, from the time he was 3 years old, Charles was the heir apparent, but he never really seemed terribly well suited to the role. Charles wasn't a robust and healthy kid. Remember, he was English royalty, so he's likely inbred worse than a pug from a puppy.
How dare you? My pug is so much less inbred than Charles. Like demonstrably less inbred than Charles. I am insulted.
Your pug also has less sleep apnea than Charles.
Yep.
And smaller
more normal
ears.
looking hands. Yeah, everything's
Claws on the right side.
Charles was a sickly kid. He's prone to sinus infections, and this is from an article in the New Yorker. He was also prone to, quote, tears. He's 3. So he was a little kid who cried and had a booger nose. That's pretty much every kid. So still crying and getting a cold wasn't stiff upper lip stuff. So his parents found him to be odd and somewhat disappointing. On his end, Charles described his mother, the former queen, as, quote, not indifferent so much as detached, end quote. So things were not starting out with a lot of warm fuzzies. And he's not even 8 years old at this point. This is before he was 8 years old.
I mean, look, I stand by my lack of sympathy, but it is kind of fucked up when your New Yorker bio mentions what a wuss you were as a kid. I mean,
Well,
Tends to haunt you. Yeah.
They just cite being a kid as proof of his wussiness, too.
well, kids are wusses.
Right, that's
Yeah.
true. Okay,
It's
you got
very
me.
true.
Yeah. Typically, royal family kids were expected to engage in rich people sports and do horse riding things. But Charles wasn't a physically gifted youngster, so he pretty much bombed out of the sports thing, and he was
Not a
too scared of
gifted
horses
oldster
to
either.
attend his lessons. So at the age of just 8 years old, his mother, the Queen, and his father, Prince Philip, sent Charles off to boarding school. I will tell you here that if you don't remember what life was like when you were 8, that's because that is still super little kid times. And Charles was absolutely distraught at being sent to live away from home at such a young age.
Because he was going to miss his mother, whom he had just described in the same terms one uses for the garden shed.
Yeah, I feel like he showed up already distraught. Right? He's pre-distraught.
Now, of course, Charles wasn't sent to a boarding school for sensitive kids afraid of horses. Instead, he was sent to the same school his father was shipped off to, because the important thing about suffering is spreading it to those you love. Anyway, the school that Charles attended was like Full Metal Jacket meets Hogwarts. It had a reputation for being particularly unpleasant and austere, and this was also in the days when people believed that men needed to be toughened up through dehumanizing systemic abuse. The school was actually founded on the promise of, quote, emancipating the sons of the powerful from the prison of privilege, end quote. Now, also, since Charles was known to everyone as the heir apparent to the throne, he was mercilessly bullied and ostracized by the other boys who resented his position. The bullying was so severe, in fact, that if any of the other boys were seen being nice to Charles, they themselves were mocked for being suck-ups. As bad as this was, Charles was still the future king, so he wasn't treated by the school itself as badly as the other kids treated him. He was given leave to spend his weekends off campus at the home of nearby family friends, where he would hang out, and I'm not kidding, just cry all weekend.
Okay, wait. His classmates thought it would be a good idea to make fun of the future king? the kid who, if he decides to do a mass shooting, can employ the army to do it? That's a bad long-term strategy, guys. It's a bad...
Well, I'm sorry to deflate your point, Eli, but we're dedicating an entire episode to making fun of the king a month and a half before half of us are going to his country, so...
That's I'm going to wear a mustache, though, so they won't.
No. As Charles moved through the rarefied worlds of privilege that surrounded him, he constantly failed to live up to the normal standards of those institutions. And so those institutions just changed their standards for Charles, so he would meet them. For example, after surviving boarding school, Charles went to Trinity College. But he shouldn't have, because he didn't earn his way into that school academically. And once he was enrolled, the college actually got a bunch of its staff together to create a curriculum just for Charles. And it was definitely nowhere near as rigorous as it would have been had he not been the Prince of Wales.
Okay, look, I understand where you're coming from here, Tom, but he's the king, right? Schools should consider things outside of academics. And I think one of the things they should consider is whether or not this particular student will one day be the king of England.
or here's a solution. What if you added if you're too dumb to get into the college despite a subjugated continent or two's worth of privilege, we bump you down the line of succession clause, right? That solves the problem too.
After graduating with his made-up curriculum from a school he didn't earn his way into, completing even that dumbed-down education with so-so grades, Charles joined the Royal Navy, again following in his father's footsteps. Except he was kind of fucking stupid. But again, he was also like British Simba. So they even fudged the military for him. When his superiors learned that Charles had, quote, an inability to add or generally to cope well with figures, end quote.
Wow.
Yeah, they did the same thing as Trinity College and made up some shit for him to do and, quote, tailored duties closer to his abilities, end quote. They changed his assignment so that he was a communications officer rather than navigator. And again, here they fudged his performance reviews so they could concentrate not on his abilities, but on how he was such a nice guy. A quality most militaries work to extinguish in the first 6 weeks of basic training.
Yes. I don't know how he's going to be prepared for that demanding job of British royalty. All that waving doesn't do itself, Tom. I mean, come on.
Said like a man who hasn't Googled King Charles' hands, Cecil. Waving those
so
horrible beanbag chairs takes work, okay? It takes work.
Okay, a podcast listener, Eli has inserted a picture here of Charles's hands into our notes. And they look like he's having an allergic reaction to being king, to be honest with you. They're like a terrifying balloon sculpture at the entrance to the Uncanny Valley's play place or something.
Man, I don't know what tune his fingers are playing, but it's a banger. That's all I'm saying. It's a fucking banger. Bangers are sausages in Britain. Okay, forget it. Go ahead. Continue on.
All right. And unlike Scott Baio, Prince Charles was definitely not in charge of anything. I mean, he was incredibly, pathologically, tightly choreographed in every single thing that he did, including his relationships with women. But the choreographers were fucking monsters. At this point, Charles was being controlled in many ways by his great uncle, Lord Mountbatten, one of the most just wildly toxic and misogynist men I have ever read about. This guy is his own episode. It's unreal. The public image that Mountbatten, and by extension Charles, wanted to portray was that of Charles the Playboy. So dashing and irresistible he might never be persuaded to settle down, when in fact, Charles was emotionally immature and just terribly awkward. Still, Mountbatten told the press that Charles was constantly, quote, popping in and out of bed with girls, end quote, in an effort to make Charles seem more virile and masculine rather than, sensitive and not terribly talented. And Mountbatten wanted Charles to live that life, not just portray it. He offered up his home to Charles as a place to bed women and encouraged him to have, quote, as many affairs as he can, end quote.
Wow. Charles got the house and Andrew got the dollhouse. Then.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I'm sorry. I'm confused. Why are affairs the goal? They want to spread the right of succession around a bit, maybe get another War of the Roses going. Get your dick wet, son. Fate of a nation.
Well, instead, what happened was that Charles fell in love with a woman named Camilla Shand when he turned about 23. But Camilla was unacceptable relationship material since, and guys, I swear this is true, she was divorced and thus not a virgin. Mountbatten considered Camilla a fun, quote, learning experience.
Jesus.
But he was never going to approve of her as a real love interest, which was just a huge bummer for Charles because he was, in fact, very much in love with her. Instead, Charles allowed himself to get set up with Lady Diana Spencer, a woman he did not love and barely knew. And in fact, on the night before his marriage to Diana, he wept for having been forced away from his real love and towards being forced to marry a woman he didn't love just because no one had ever fucked her yet.
All right. Well, it's obvious that Tom is Team Markle. So while I attempt to defend the crest and crown in a duel, we'll take a little break for apropos of nothing. Oh, boo-hoo! Boo-hoo, I say! Boo-hoo!
Charles!
Who's there?
It's me, your first cousin 18 times removed, King Henry V. Why do you weep, Charles?
Oh, first cousin Henry, 18 times removed, I shall never live up to the title of king. I am soft and stupid, and I can't lead anyone.
Don't be silly, Charles. You're going to be a fantastic king.
But I'm not good at anything, and nobody likes me.
Oh, who fucking cares, Charles? Look, you think I was good at anything? I wiped with my hand, and I thought God gave me dreams. If you make it through your rule without a genocide or a war, you're automatically in, like, the top 10% of all kings.
I am?
You sure are, hell. You're going to be the head of one of the most progressive churches in the world just by ignoring it.
I am, aren't I? But cousin, surely there's a better way? A system by which a man or a woman can rule themselves? What about democracy?
Democracy? That leads to Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, Charles. Are you worse than either of them?
No, I suppose I'm not, am I? Well, thank you, Cousin Harry.
Remember what I've told you here today, Charles, and also remember that your mom and dad were cousins. They were cousins.
That's true.
Cousins.
Yeah. And we're back. When we left off, Charles was ripped from the arms of love and forced to marry some chick from Cheers or something. What happened next, Tom?
All right, so more ink has been spilled delving into that nightmare marriage, and there's no way to possibly and meaningfully add to that story. But from all accounts, this doomed marriage, brokered by a misogynist who needed a virgin like an old-timey fairy tale villain, went off the rails pretty much right away. And both Diana and Charles behaved pretty terribly, and there's plenty in both of them to find challenging to identify with and morally justify. And where your sympathies lie likely depends more on whose version of which story you're getting. Charles was and is, by many accounts, an insufferable twat. He's haughty and he's arrogant without having much to be all that chest-pumpingly proud of. And he was not just raised, but actually bred for the position he found himself in. And Diana was no demure wallflower content to sit back and watch the incompetent, jug-eared ninny strut and preen. Instead, she mocked him for his arrogance and pomposity, and he belittled her for just about everything. And Charles never stopped loving and sleeping with Camilla. Like, not at all. They were not, to put it mildly, a happy couple.
Okay, granted, it could just be your telling, but I'm finding Diana super duper easy to identify with and morally justify.
It's the jug-eared thing. I don't know about what it was for you guys, but the jug-eared.
I don't want to spend a ton more time on the drama that unfolded as Charles and Diana's marriage collapsed, but obviously the couple did their duty at least a few times to produce heirs. Eventually, Charles and Diana would separate and formally divorce, and then Keith chased Diana down and killed her in a tunnel in Paris about a year later.
Okay. I'll have you know that divorcing and murdering your wife is a fine English tradition for kings.
That's true.
Safe to say that Charles's life has not been a happy one to date, and he hasn't had much in the way of meaningful success in anything he's tried or that has been forced upon him. Enter now Laurens van der Post. Van der Post was a documentarian and author, and also, whatever this means, quote, an amateur ethnographer, end quote. I don't know how you do that at the amateur level. Van der Post believed that humanity needed to be rescued from the, quote, superstition of the intellect, end quote, and that Charles, with his decidedly uninspired intellect, was essential to this rescue. He told Charles, quote, the battle for our renewal can be most naturally led by what is still one of the few great living symbols accessible to us, the symbol of the crown, end quote. Now, I don't really know what that means, but I do know how it sounds. And it sounds like telling a guy who is never made to feel personally important that he finally matters. And so Charles dug right the fuck in.
He sure did, right? I'm an important and misunderstood genius sent to save the world from the fall of culture? Well, I think I'm the best person to assess this claim. Let's hear what he has to say.
Well, okay, but like he was living in a 775-room castle at the expense of the state and told that he was like ordained by God to lead this country. I feel like somebody made him feel personally important before this, no?
Golden handcuffs, no illusions. Golden handcuffs.
Charles, at this point, basically enters his teen girl Wiccan phase. All right, he jumps into his sacred geometry and dream analysis, as well as Sufism, which, in case you didn't Google that a few minutes ago like I did, is a kind of Islamic mysticism. He then started going to faith healers to help him understand, quote, a lot of bottled feelings, end quote. He went to the Kalahari Desert and had a vision while looking into a herd of zebras of an earthly eternity. Again, no idea what that means, but likely neither does Charles.
Man, I think we can all agree. Some people just have too much fucking money.
Right.
Man. They're just too much fucking money.
Yeah. I mean, not us. We need more.
No,
there are people out there.
Look, If you're British royalty and want to become a patron on a per episode basis, we will welcome
Absolutely.
you.
We're so viable. You have no idea how viable we are.
Now, we now have to head into the section of the essay where I relate some of the baffling and horrible and just bizarre shit Charles has said and the weird hills he keeps trying to die on. He's known for sending long missives to government ministers, which are known as Black Spider memos, because of the distinctive scrawl that is his handwriting. He has promoted Gerson therapy. That is the quack cancer cure that suggests that if you eat a bunch of vegetables and turn your blood alkaline, your cancer is going to go away.
Yeah.
It won't, by the way. It will not do that. No.
Okay, to
it's
be
not.
fair, if your mom was kept necromantically alive for longer than any other queen in history, you'd start dabbling
Yeah.
into dark arts too,
Okay.
Tom.
Eli has a point.
That's
Eli
fair.
has
That
a
is
point.
okay. Point Eli. He's argued that the Western world has taken a far too mechanistic approach to science, which I guess is true in the sense that science is literally a mechanism. But this is a guy who is a vocal patron and supporter of homeopathy. Charles also lobbies for the use of complementary medicine, which is basically pairing real medicine with nonsense and then attributing some of the success to the nonsense.
Right. Which is, by the way, how we know that the king hates friend of the show, Michael Marshall, who famously called him a dumbass in a national paper before getting his beloved homeopathy shit dropped from the NIH. I'm just saying, we know a guy who the King of England personally hates. That's resume material, y'all.
Yeah. Not going on any drives with Marsh while we're at QED, I'll tell you that.
Charles pretty much had no reason to even be alive while Queen Elizabeth was still kicking, so he behaved over the years like a man adrift, just bounding around trying to say or believe or do anything even accidentally relevant. He's given speeches on the decline of the Patagonian toothfish. He opined on which helicopters British soldiers in Iraq should be using. He's known for his hot takes on the problem of omitting the study of Shakespeare in school and has bitterly complained about the hideousness of tall buildings. Basically, he was the internet before anyone else was on it.
Yeah. He was a rich guy with no filter before Twitter. He was a trailblazer. Thank you very much.
I mean, he's just a hot take machine, and his takes are all super fucking weird. He's a vocal defender of fox hunting, which, by the way, no one should be. That's cruel. But he's also an avid and vocal and consistent environmentalist.
I don't know if consistent is the right word there.
And then he says shit like this word salad jumble. Quote, I have come to realize that my entire life has been so far motivated by a desire to heal the dismembered landscape and the poisoned soul, the cruelly shattered townscape where harmony has been replaced by cacophony, to heal the divisions between intuitive and rational thought, between mind and body and soul, so that the temple of our humanity can once again be lit by a sacred flame.
Cool.
End quote.
Are you going to sell one of your many secret jewels so that you can do some of that stuff? No? Okay. I just checking.
Also, sir, this is a Wendy's. Just what's on the menu, man.
Bring me to this Wendy. I desire an affair with her.
So Charles eventually married his first love, Camilla, in 2005, and he is now the actual king of England and the whole damn English empire. But Charles is not particularly well liked or loved. Although a significant majority still believe the country is better off having a regent than not, it seems clear that they'd prefer pretty much anyone to Charles. In both liberal and conservative media, Charles is described variously as a twit, a prat, an idiot, hopelessly thin-skinned, naive, and a preening snob, among many other insults. He travels with his own white leather toilet seat.
God, fuck you for leaving that to the end of the essay so that we couldn't be making jokes about that the whole time.
And again, the King of England campaigns against a secular, decadent Western world. Just that we now have this contradiction of a man as the new King of England seems a perfect metaphor for a world at once rightfully disdainful of monarchs and absolutely fascinated by them.
And if you had to summarize what you've learned in one sentence, what would it be?
It's not actually all that good to be king.
I'll take it if he doesn't want it.
And are you ready for the quiz?
Let's do it.
All right, I have a question here for you. You presented a really sympathetic portrait here, and I think that's good, right? Everybody focuses on all the person born into fabulous wealth, earned by the exploitation of foreign lands and the subjugation of their people has, but not enough people focus on the things he doesn't have. So, in addition to the stuff that you've talked about in the essay, what other thing that the rest of us just take for granted has King Charles never had?
Amazing.
A, the feeling of wondering if he could afford something. B, the feeling of wondering if he had room for it at his house. C, the perpetual angst of knowing he's a few unfortunate turns away from abject poverty. Or D, a care in the fucking world. My God, the man has had a gap light. Okay?
It's secret answer E. It's all of those above. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a kind of reject the premise.
Yeah,
I
right.
apologize for that.
I know. Yeah.
All right, Tom. A lot of people are saying now that the Queen is dead. It's time to disband the monarchy in England. Why is that? A, because of how swimmingly the democratic part of the UK's government is going right now.
Wow.
B, because they'd like
Zing.
to reduce their tourist attractions from an old lady's fancy house to literally
Holy
fucking nothing.
shit, man. Yikes.
That's fucking true.
C,
Yikes.
so that England could focus on its robust culture of going down to the pub for a pint every evening of your life until you die in a gray chair.
Wow.
Or D,
Jesus Christ.
they just really hate long lines and they don't want to do
Wow.
another one.
Man.
This is the truest set of questions you've ever written, but it's clear. Oh, I don't know. It's clearly C. So England's gonna focus
Oh.
on its culture of going to the pub.
That's correct. That is correct.
Normally, I don't mind going after Noah and Eli, but they really crushed this question this week. Oh, good for you guys. Okay, I have a really bad one. Tom, King Charles will have one more name change after he dies. What will it be? A, if he lies in state, he'll be the Duke of Rottingham. B, throw him in with the other relics of the British Museum and he could be 6 feet plunder. C, if he's cremated, he could be Charlie. Or D, if he's buried, Ground Chuck.
Oh, ground chuck.
Ground Chuck.
It's ground chuck.
I'm sorry, it is the Duke of Rottingham. Look at his fingers.
Damn it.
Look
It's
at his
fancy. I should've
fingers. You
known.
can
He
tell.
will
You know. You know.
Wednesday.
I should have known.
Cecil identified the dead body in our essay, so Cecil wins.
All right. I'm going to pick Noah next week.
All right. Well, for Tom, Cecil, Noah, and Heath Enright, I'm Eli Bosnick. Thanking you for hanging out with us today. We'll be back next week, and by then, Noah will be an expert on something else. Between now and then, you can listen to our podcasts by Googling us and scrolling past our Facebooks. And if you'd like to help keep the show going, you can make a per-episode donation at patreon.com/citationpod. Or, hey, leave us a 5-star review everywhere you can. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, check out past episodes, connect with us on social media, or check the show notes, be sure to check out citationpod.com.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely. And parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/getstarted. That's GREENLIGHT.com/getstarted.